Cowboy found his neighbor's abandoned mail-order bride freezing in a blizzard and gave her a new life. The storm came in fast, the kind that did not ask permission. 1 hour the sky was only gray, the next it was a spinning wall of white that erased the horizon. Snow flew sideways, biting at anything it touched. The wind pushed hard enough to make fences groan and trees bow. Out on the open frontier, a person could get lost only a few steps from their own door. Elias Carter knew that truth better than most. He lived on a wide stretch of land at the edge of the colony territory, where old ranch life and New World tech had learned to share space. His cabin looked like any cowboy's place from a distance. Wooden porch, stacked firewood, a corral built by hand, but hidden under the boards were heat panels, power lines, and a small generator that drank sunlight on clear days. He did not talk about it much. Out here, people didn't ask questions unless they needed the answer. That afternoon, Elias had been riding fence lines before the storm hit. He had planned to be home early, but a loose post had bothered him, and he told himself he would fix it quickly. He was the type of man who finished what he started. Now he regretted it. His horse, Dusty, pushed forward with steady strength, but even Dusty's ears were pinned back against the cold. Elias pulled his scarf higher and lowered his hat brim to shield his eyes. He kept one hand on the reins and the other near the saddle horn, staying balanced as the ground disappeared under drifting snow. The fence line on the east side ran close to the Halver place, his neighbor's ranch, if it could still be called that. The Halver ranch had been empty for months. People said Mr. Halver had gone to a bigger settlement to work off-world trade deals and never returned. After that, the property slowly fell quiet. No smoke from the chimney, no hoof prints near the barn, no lights in the windows at night. Elias rarely rode near it. Something about empty houses felt wrong, like they were waiting. But today, the storm forced his path closer. The wind shifted, and for a moment the snow thinned. Elias saw a dark shape near the old fence, half hidden by a drift. At first he thought it was a broken tarp, maybe blown loose from the Halver barn. Then the shape moved, just a little, and his stomach tightened. He turned Dusty toward it without thinking. As he got closer, the shape became a person. A woman. She lay on her side, one arm tucked under her, the other wrapped around a small metal case. Snow piled up against her back. Her hair was pale with ice, and her lashes were white with frost. She looked like someone who had been walking until her body simply stopped. Elias dismounted fast, boots sinking deep. He knelt beside her and brushed snow away from her face with his gloved hand. "Ma'am," he said, keeping his voice steady. "Can you hear me?" Her lips parted, but only a weak breath came out. Her eyes opened halfway, unfocused and glassy. She tried to speak, and the sound was so faint the wind almost stole it. Elias did not waste time. He slid one arm under her shoulders and the other under her knees. She was lighter than he expected, like she hadn't eaten right for days. He wrapped his coat around her as best he could and lifted her onto the saddle in front of him. She clutched the metal case like it was the last solid thing in the world. "Easy," Elias murmured. "I've got you. Just hold on." He swung up behind her, pulled her close, and turned Dusty toward home. The storm thickened again, turning the world into swirling white noise. Elias guided the horse by memory, using landmarks he could not see but could feel. The slight slope near the creek bed, the cluster of rocks that always gathered drifted snow, the wind that hit harder when he turned west. His cabin was not far, but in a storm like this, distance played tricks. Minutes stretched long. The woman's head rested against his chest, and he could feel her shaking. Elias kept talking to her, not because he expected answers, but because silence out in the storm felt dangerous. "You're going to be all right," he said. "We'll get warm."
"We'll get you some soup?"
"Just breathe." When the faint outline of his barn finally appeared, Elias felt relief wash through him so quickly it made his hands tremble. He guided Dusty into the lee side, where the barn blocked some of the wind. He helped the woman down carefully, almost carrying her across the yard as the storm tried to pull them apart. Inside the cabin, heat wrapped around them like a blanket. Elias kicked the door shut with his heel, locked it, and moved fast. He laid the woman on his couch near the fire, piled quilts on top of her, and set a kettle to boil. He pulled off her gloves, thin, cheap fabric that offered almost no protection, and rubbed her hands gently to bring warmth back. Her skin was cold, but she was breathing, and that mattered. Elias glanced at the metal case she still held. Her fingers were stiff around it, like her body refused to let it go. He didn't force it. Instead, he set a folded towel under it so it wouldn't press into her ribs, and left it where it was. He placed a warm mug near her mouth. "Small sips," he said softly. "Don't rush." After a while, her eyelids fluttered. She drank a little, coughed once, then breathed easier. Color returned slowly to her cheeks. Elias sat in a chair across from her, not too close, giving her space while staying ready if she needed help. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the cabin felt like a small island of safety. Hours passed. The fire crackled. The kettle whistled again. Elias made simple broth and let it cool. He watched the woman's breathing settle into a steadier rhythm, and only then did the tightness in his chest ease. Near midnight, her eyes opened fully. She looked around, confused at first, then alert. Her gaze landed on Elias. Her grip tightened on the metal case. "Where am I?" she asked. Her voice was dry but clear. "You're at my place," Elias said. "Carter Ranch. You were out by the Halver fence line." At the name Halver, her face changed. Pain flickered across it, quick but deep. I was going there," she whispered. Elias leaned forward slightly. "Why?" "That's where I was sent." "Sent?" Elias repeated, careful with his tone. He didn't want to scare her. Her eyes dropped to the metal case. With slow hands, she opened it and pulled out a sealed envelope and a small data card. The envelope was stamped with a transport company logo and a bold label, "Delivery confirmed." It looked official, but the corners were worn like she had held it too long. "I'm a mail-order bride," she said quietly, as if saying it too loud would make it real in a worse way. It was an agreement, a contract for a new life. Elias frowned, not at her, but at the idea. The frontier had plenty of lonely men, and there were plenty of women in older settlements who wanted a safer place to live. These deals happened. Some worked out fine, some didn't. The best ones were honest. The worst ones were built on pressure and false promises. "You were supposed to meet someone at the Halver Ranch?" Elias asked. "Yes." Her voice trembled. "I arrived at the station 2 days ago. I waited. No one came. The transport clerk said the payment was already processed. He told me to take the supply route and follow the markers. He said it was only a short walk." Elias stared at the fire for a moment. 2 days ago. And then the storm. "That clerk should have known better," he said, anger rising, but he kept his voice controlled. He looked back at her. "What's your name?" She hesitated, then answered. "Lena." "Lena," Elias said, letting the name sit gently between them. "I'm Elias." Her eyes searched his face, like she was trying to decide if he was real or just another problem. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to be trouble. I just didn't know where else to go."
Elias shook his head. "You're not trouble."
"You're a person who got left out in a storm." Her shoulders sagged a little, as if those words loosened a knot inside her. Elias stood and poured her a bowl of broth. "Eat what you can. Then rest. We'll figure out the rest in the morning." Lena took the bowl with both hands. Her fingers still shook, but less now. She sipped slowly. The warmth seemed to reach deeper than her skin. After a few minutes, she asked, "Why did you come out there in the storm?" Elias shrugged. "I was checking the fence line. I should have come home earlier." "And you saw me?" "I saw something that didn't belong in the snow," he said. "I got closer." Lena looked down, then back up. "If you hadn't—" Elias cut the thought off gently. "But I did." The cabin fell quiet again, not uncomfortable, just careful. Outside, the blizzard continued to howl, but the walls held. The lights stayed on. The fire stayed strong. Lena's eyes grew heavy. Before she drifted off, she whispered, "They said this place would be my new start." The quilts rising and falling with her breath. He didn't know what kind of people had arranged her contract. He didn't know what she had left behind. He didn't know what she would choose when the storm passed, but he knew one thing. This frontier could be cruel when people treated each other like cargo. And Elias Carter had never been the kind of man who looked away when someone needed a hand. He added another log to the fire, then sat back down in his chair, keeping quiet watch through the long winter night while the storm tried, and failed, to break the small safe space he had made. Morning arrived slowly, the sun barely pushing through a gray sky. The snow had softened overnight, leaving the world quiet and white. Elias Carter moved carefully through the cabin, checking the fire and the kettle. Lena slept still, her body curled under thick quilts. Her breathing was calm now, even, but Elias knew that 2 days of exposure could leave someone weak in ways that weren't always visible. He went to the small pantry and pulled out a tin of dried fruit and some biscuits. Slowly, he prepared a simple breakfast, letting the warmth of the kitchen fill the room. The kettle hissed on the stove, sending soft steam into the cold air. Elias moved quietly, not wanting to wake her too suddenly. When Lena stirred, she blinked at the light, her face pale but steadier than yesterday. "Good morning," she whispered. Her voice had a soft tremble, but it was stronger than before. "Good morning," Elias said. He placed the bowl of warm oatmeal in front of her. "Eat slowly. It's easy on your stomach." She nodded and took small spoonfuls. She watched him while she ate, as if trying to understand this man who had saved her from the snow. She had come expecting abandonment. Instead, she found warmth, safety, and quiet patience. Why did you help me?" she asked after a while, setting the spoon down. Elias shrugged. "Because someone should. Storms don't wait for people to be ready. You needed help." She had heard about frontier men who were harsh, who worked with cold logic, who expected people to fend for themselves. Elias didn't seem like that at all. He seemed steady, solid. Someone who could be trusted. After breakfast, Elias helped her to her feet. Her legs were stiff, and she leaned slightly on him, but she could walk now. He handed her a thick coat, one that had been patched and worn, but still offered warmth. Dusty, his horse, waited in the corral, snorting clouds of steam into the cold morning air. Do you ride?" Elias asked. Lena hesitated. "I've never ridden a horse like this. I mean, I've seen horses, but not up close like this." "That's okay," Elias said. "I'll show you. We'll start slow." He led her to Dusty, brushing snow off the horse's back and checking the saddle. Lena reached out tentatively, touching the horse's neck. Dusty nuzzled her hand, and she jumped slightly at the warmth. Elias chuckled softly. "Don't worry. He's friendly. You'll get used to him." He lifted her onto the saddle first, showing her how to sit, how to hold the reins, and how to balance. She followed his instructions carefully, a little stiff at first, but she learned quickly. By the time she felt comfortable, Elias climbed up behind her for support. They rode slowly around the yard, the snow crunching beneath Dusty's hooves. Lena laughed softly when the horse slipped on a patch of ice, and Elias laughed with her. It was the first sound of pure joy in days. After the ride, they returned to the cabin. Elias had more chores to attend to, repairing a fence post that had broken during the storm, checking a solar panel that had been damaged by ice, but Lena wanted to help. She picked up tools, learning to hammer nails and tighten screws under Elias's watchful eye. "You have a good hand," Elias said. "You pick things up fast." Lena smiled, proud that she could contribute. She had expected to be helpless, but here she was, helping a man who had saved her. It gave her a sense of purpose she had not felt in a long time. As the day passed, she began to notice more about the ranch. Small drones hovered near the barn, repairing minor damages automatically. Pipes ran beneath the cabin, delivering hot water to the shower and kitchen. Elias had blended old frontier living with technology in a way that seemed natural, almost seamless. "It's strange," Lena said as she watched a drone fix a broken hinge. "I expected the frontier to be all dirt and wood."
"But it's alive."
"Frontier life has always been about survival. Some of us just make it easier with tools." Lena nodded, thinking about her own life before the mail order arrangement. Her home colony had been harsh, but it had rules and expectations and limits. Out here, everything was uncertain. But there was freedom, too, a chance to shape life rather than follow instructions. That evening, the sky cleared slightly. The moon cast a pale light over the snow, and the wind softened. Elias and Lena stood outside the cabin, looking over the vast plains. "You saved me," Lena said quietly. "Not just from the storm, but everything that came before. I was expecting nothing. No one." "You didn't get nothing," Elias said. "You got help when you needed it. That's enough for now." She looked at him, studying his expression. "Why are you so calm? The storm, the snow, the danger. You never seem worried."
Life out here teaches you to stay steady.
"If you panic, the cold or the snow or whatever else will win." Lena nodded slowly, understanding more than she had expected. This man had survived storms before. He knew what it meant to face danger and remain calm. Days passed in a rhythm that felt almost ordinary. Lena regained her strength fully, helping with chores, learning to cook simple meals, and repairing small parts of the barn. She watched Elias carefully as he worked, noticing the way he handled horses, tools, and the little machines that kept the ranch running. Every action was careful, deliberate, confident. One afternoon, a sound from the ridge above the cabin caught Elias's attention. A dust trail appeared in the distance, a vehicle moving across the snow. Elias tensed, recognizing the type. Traders, perhaps, or someone looking for something lost in the storm. He watched carefully. The vehicle slowed as it approached the ranch, and 3 people stepped out, dressed in uniforms marked with the corporate logo of a transport company. Lena froze beside him. "Are they here for me?" she whispered. Elias nodded slightly. "Possibly. Stay calm." The strangers walked toward the cabin. Their movements were polite, but every step carried authority. One of them held a small device showing data that looked official. "You are the person delivered to the Halver Ranch?" the leader asked. His voice was smooth but carried an edge. Lena nodded cautiously. "Yes." "You are required to return with us," the man said. "Your contract is active. The company has documentation." I never agreed to anything beyond the delivery," Lena said. Her voice trembled slightly. Elias stepped forward. "She stays here until she chooses otherwise." The 3 visitors exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Elias could see the balance of power shifting. Out here, the law bent differently, and the community often ignored distant contracts if they interfered with basic fairness. "Your decision is unusual," the leader said, though he tried to keep it calm. "You may not understand the legal consequences." Lena's hands clenched slightly around her coat. "I understand enough. I want to stay here." Elias gave a small nod, approving silently. He knew how frontier life worked. People who were desperate often tried to claim others as property. But here, Lena had choice. She had found safety. That was what mattered. The stranger stepped back slightly, still holding authority, but unsure how far to push. They spoke in quiet tones among themselves before leaving, promising to return with proper authorization. When the door closed behind them, the weight of the moment settled. Elias went to the stove, lighting a small lamp to replace the fading daylight. Lena sat near the fire, staring at the flames. "You don't have to protect me like this," she said softly. Elias looked at her, steady and calm. "Everyone deserves a chance to choose their life. You already survived one storm, the next one doesn't have to be the same." She watched him quietly, realizing that this quiet, steady man had given her more than warmth and shelter. He had given her a chance to be herself, to be safe, and to make her own decisions. That night, as the fire burned low, Lena slept deeply for the first time in days. Elias kept watch from a chair nearby, listening to the wind outside and the soft rise and fall of her breathing. The storm had passed, at least for now, but the lessons it brought lingered. Out here, survival was not just about strength. It was about trust, patience, and the courage to help when no one else would. And Elias Carter had plenty of all 3. The frontier had tested them both, but now in the quiet glow of the cabin something else began to grow. The start of a new life, one built on trust, kindness, and the simple promise of protection in a world that too often had none. Winter slowly loosened its grip on the plains. The heavy snow began to melt, revealing patches of brown grass and frozen streams that trickled slowly toward the distant river. Elias Carter and Lena moved through the ranch together, the days settling into a rhythm that felt almost ordinary. The morning frost still made the air sharp, but sunlight reflected off the snow in a gentle glow. Out here, life followed its own rules. Every task mattered. Every moment counted. Lena had grown stronger in ways she hadn't expected. She learned to ride Dusty confidently, her balance improving with each trip around the yard. At first, she had been timid, afraid the horse might stumble or throw her into the cold snow. But Elias had been patient, showing her how to anticipate movements, how to shift her weight with Dusty's steps, and how to hold the reins so that both she and the horse moved as one. By mid-morning, she could guide Dusty on her own, and Elias could focus on other chores while keeping a careful eye on her. She also learned to help with the ranch itself. Fences needed repair, broken gates had to be reset, and the barn required constant attention after the heavy storm. Elias had always treated her as capable, never ordering her around. She appreciated that more than she could say. Many people had tried to tell her what she could or couldn't do in her life, but Elias simply showed her how to do things safely and let her decide. One afternoon, while they worked on the corral, Lena paused to watch Elias adjust the old solar panels on the roof of the barn. He climbed carefully, using a combination of ropes and metal brackets to secure the panels. A small drone hovered nearby, scanning for damage and relaying images to a screen inside the barn. Lena watched, fascinated by how effortlessly Elias blended old and new. "You make it look easy," she said, brushing hair out of her face. He glanced down, smiling faintly. "It's practice. And patience. You can do the same with anything, if you take your time." She nodded, thinking about the ways her own life had felt, rushed and unfair. Here, she was learning not just skills, but a sense of confidence she hadn't known she could have. By late afternoon, the sky darkened again, but this time not with a storm. The wind was still, and the snow reflected the pale light of the sun. Dusty and the other horses grazed near the corral, and the ranch looked peaceful. For the first time in weeks, Lena felt a sense of normalcy she hadn't thought possible. But the frontier always held surprises. A dust trail appeared on the horizon, moving faster than any simple traveler could manage. Elias immediately recognized the type of vehicle. It was a transport vehicle from one of the corporate companies that handled deliveries like the one Lena had originally traveled for. His jaw tightened. He had hoped they had not tracked her, but it seemed unlikely. "They're back," he said quietly. Lena froze beside him, her hands clutching the edges of her coat. "What do they want?" she asked, her voice trembling. "They want to take you," Elias said, "or at least, they think they do." 3 figures stepped out, their uniforms marked with the official insignia of the transport company. They moved deliberately, each carrying a small device that looked official, with legal papers displayed on its screen. Elias and Lena watched from the barn doorway. The strangers paused at the fence, looking around as if measuring their authority. Elias knew they would try to pressure into leaving. They had no idea how this land worked. Out here, rules were different. A person could claim someone as property on paper, but a community of independent ranchers could, and often would, protect the person if the claim seemed unfair. The leader of the 3 approached the barn. He spoke clearly, his voice calm but firm. "You are the person delivered to the Halver Ranch," he said. "Your contract is active. You are required to return with us immediately." "I never agreed to anything beyond delivery," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. Elias stepped in front of her, his posture steady. "She stays here until she chooses otherwise," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The 3 visitors exchanged looks. The leader frowned. "This is unusual. She may not understand the legal consequences of refusing." "I understand enough," Lena said, her voice now clear and confident. "I choose to stay here." The strangers hesitated, then stepped back, debating quietly among themselves. Elias knew they could push harder, bring more people, or use official channels. But the frontier was unpredictable, and he had allies nearby. Other ranchers valued independence, and corporate authority rarely extended into these remote areas without trouble. Finally, the strangers left, muttering about returning with proper authorization. Elias watched them go, then turned back to Lena. "You don't have to worry," he said softly. "I won't let anyone force you." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and relief. "You didn't just save me from the snow," she said. "You're saving me from everything I didn't expect." Elias shrugged. "You deserve a choice. That's all." The tension slowly eased. They returned inside the cabin where the fire still burned warmly. Lena helped set a simple dinner, chopping vegetables and stirring stew in the pot. She laughed quietly when Elias dropped a piece of bread on the floor and Dusty snatched it before anyone could react. The sound of her laughter felt lighter than it had in weeks, and Elias felt some of the worry leave his shoulders. After dinner, they sat by the fire. Elias explained more about the ranch, how he blended traditional skills with technology, and how the frontier required both patience and adaptability. Lena listened closely, fascinated by the way he treated the land as a partner rather than a tool. "You really know how to survive out here," she said. "I don't survive alone," Elias replied. "This land, these animals, even the machines, they all work together. You can't do it by yourself." She nodded thoughtfully, realizing how different this life was from the one she had expected. Out in the colony, everything was controlled, measured, and limited. Here, survival depended on trust, cooperation, and careful decision-making. The moonlight reflected on patches of snow that had not yet melted. Elias added another log to the fire and looked at Lena, who sat near the warmth, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. "You're strong," he said. "More than you know." "I'm learning." He nodded, knowing she meant more than just the skills. She was learning to trust, to make choices, to see the world as a place where she could have control over her life. That was more important than riding a horse or mending a fence. For the first time since the storm, both felt a quiet sense of peace. The frontier was still dangerous, and challenges would come again. But now, they faced the world together, not as strangers, but as people who had found each other in the middle of a harsh winter. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, and Dusty shifted softly in the corral. Inside, the cabin glowed with warmth, and for the first time in a long time, Lena felt the kind of safety she had dreamed about. Elias sat back in his chair, watching her. He knew that tomorrow might bring new challenges. The corporate company could return. Other dangers could appear. But he also knew that they had something stronger than contracts or storms: trust, courage, and the determination to protect what mattered. And for Lena, that trust was the beginning of a new life. One she had never expected, but now one she was ready to embrace. As the fire burned low, Elias and Lena sat quietly, listening to the faint sounds of the frontier night. Snow melted in small streams outside, and the world felt calm. The storm had passed. The challenges remained, but so did the chance for choice, safety, and a future built together. The frontier was harsh. Life could be cruel. But sometimes, in the middle of frozen plains and empty ranches, people could find warmth, trust, and hope. And that hope was enough to begin again. Spring arrived slowly on the frontier. Snow melted in patches, revealing brown grass, small wildflowers, and the uneven earth beneath. The wind softened, carrying the smell of wet soil and growing plants. Rivers that had frozen over now gurgled along their banks, and the horizon stretched endlessly, bright and open. Elias Carter and Lena moved through the ranch together, each morning bringing new tasks and new moments of discovery. Lena had grown stronger and more confident with each passing day. She rode Dusty with ease, guiding the horse across the open fields without hesitation. At first she had been timid, afraid of falling or losing control, but now she laughed as Dusty trotted and galloped, her hands steady on the reins. Elias often rode behind her, careful not to crowd her space, letting her lead while he offered quiet guidance. They worked side by side on the ranch. Fences that had been broken by winter storms were repaired, the barn roof patched, and the corral strengthened. Elias continued to integrate his small machines and drones into the daily routine, teaching Lena how to use them safely. She learned quickly, her curiosity matched by her determination. "You're fast," Elias said one morning as she adjusted a broken fence sensor. Lena smiled faintly. "I want to help. I don't want to just watch."
Good. Out here, everyone contributes.
That's how you survive and how you thrive. Their days were filled with work, but also moments of quiet. They shared meals, sometimes simple soup or bread, sometimes roasted meat from the small herd. Lena learned to cook in the small kitchen, and Elias taught her to store food properly, how to keep it safe from the cold and from animals. One afternoon, while the sun was low in the sky, a movement appeared on the ridge above the ranch. Dust rose from the dirt in a thin cloud, signaling the approach of a vehicle. Elias recognized it immediately, a transport from one of the companies that had arranged Lena's original delivery. His jaw tightened. "They're back," he said quietly. Lena's hands tightened on her coat. "Are they here for me?"
They think they are, Elias said.
"Stay close to me. Don't panic." The vehicle stopped at the edge of the ranch. 3 figures stepped out, their uniforms marked with the official insignia of the transport company. They moved deliberately, carrying devices that displayed legal documents. Their posture was polite but authoritative. Elias understood that they expected compliance without question. The leader approached. "You are the person delivered to the Halver Ranch," he said. "Your contract is active. You are required to return with us immediately." Lena stepped slightly forward, her hands gripping her coat. "I never agreed to anything beyond delivery," she said, her voice steady despite the tension. Elias moved beside her. "She stays here until she chooses otherwise," he said, his voice calm but firm. "This is unusual. She may not understand the legal consequences of refusing." "I understand enough," Lena said firmly. "I choose to stay here." The strangers hesitated, exchanging glances. Elias kept his stance steady, making it clear that force would not work here. On the frontier, fairness often outweighed contracts. Communities protected those who were vulnerable from those who tried to claim them unjustly. After a moment, the strangers stepped back, muttering about returning with proper authorization. Elias watched them leave before turning back to Lena. "You're safe," he said softly. "Now, at least." Lena exhaled, relief washing over her. She looked at Elias, seeing in him a protector, a guide, and someone who treated her as capable, not fragile. "You didn't just save me from the snow," she said. "You're saving me from everything I didn't expect." Elias shrugged. "I'm just giving you a choice, that's all." The tension eased as they returned inside. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and fresh bread. The fire crackled, filling the room with warmth and soft light. Lena helped set the table for a simple meal, chopping vegetables and stirring the stew. Dusty shifted in the corral outside, his warm breath fogging in the cool air. Over dinner, they spoke quietly. Elias explained more about the ranch, the way he combined frontier skills with technology, and how the land demanded attention, patience, and respect. Lena listened intently, fascinated by the balance he maintained between old and new. "You've built a good life here," she said. "I didn't build it alone," Elias replied. "The land, the animals, even the machines, they all help. And I've had to learn from mistakes. You do the same, and you survive." She realized that this was unlike any life she had known. Back in the colony, everything was controlled, measured, and limited. Here, the frontier demanded independence, trust, and courage. And with Elias, she felt she could meet those demands. Night fell quietly without storm or wind. The cabin glowed from the fire and a small lamp on the table. Elias added a log to the flames and looked at Lena, who sat nearby, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. "You're strong," he said, "more than you realize." "I'm learning," she replied, a faint smile on her lips. He understood she meant more than skills. She was learning to trust, to choose, to see that the world could be shaped, not just endured. That knowledge, he thought, was more valuable than anything else the frontier offered. The following days passed in similar fashion. They worked together, shared meals, repaired the ranch, and rode across the fields. With each day, Lena grew more confident in herself and in her place at the ranch. Dusty became her constant companion, and she learned to anticipate the horse's movements, to guide him through snow, mud, and uneven terrain. One morning, Elias showed her the small drones that helped maintain the property. "They can't replace hands, but they make work easier," he said, demonstrating a panel of controls. Lena watched closely, then began learning to pilot the drones herself. She was careful, methodical, and quick to understand. By the time the afternoon sun was high, she could manage repairs on her own with a drone hovering nearby. Elias watched with quiet approval. She was no longer just a visitor or someone who had been rescued. She was a partner in the work of the ranch. Later that week, Elias decided it was time to check the perimeter. A few old markers had been damaged in the winter storms, and he wanted to make sure the ranch boundaries were secure. Lena rode beside him. Dusty trotted steadily, and the wind carried a gentle warmth that hinted at the coming summer. As they rode, Elias pointed out the distant hills and the old trail that led to neighboring ranches. "You see that ridge?" he asked. "From here you can see almost everything for miles. It's why we ride it regularly. We need to know what's coming before it arrives." Lena nodded, understanding more about the rhythm of frontier life. "It feels alive," she said. "Like the land itself watches you. That's one way to put it," Elias said, smiling faintly. "You learn to listen to it, to respect it, and to work with it. The land doesn't forgive laziness." Their ride took them across frozen streams that were now thawing, through fields dotted with early wildflowers, and past the fence lines they had repaired together. By the time they returned to the cabin, both were tired but satisfied. That night, as the fire burned low and the wind whispered outside, Elias and Lena sat quietly. No one spoke at first, each lost in thought. Then Lena said, "I never thought I could have this, safety, freedom, even after everything I went through." "You earned it," Elias said softly. "You survived the storm, and you made choices along the way. This is yours now, because you decided it would be. I want to keep learning. I want to help you not just live here." "You already do," Elias replied. "Every day in every way you do." Outside, the frontier was quiet. The snow had melted into small streams, the air smelled of wet earth, and the first hints of green were pushing through the soil. Inside the cabin, warmth and light made a home. The challenges of the frontier remained, and the corporate company could return, bringing rules, authority, or legal complications. But for now, Elias and Lena had something stronger than threats or contracts: trust, courage, and the freedom to choose. And Lena had something she had never had before: a life built for herself, with someone beside her who would stand quietly but firmly when danger came. Someone who treated her as a partner, not a problem. As the fire crackled softly, Elias added one last log and sat back. Lena watched the flames, thinking about the snowstorm that had brought her here, and how a simple act of help had changed everything. The frontier had tested them both, but it had also shown them that in a harsh and uncertain world, trust, patience, and courage could create a place of safety, hope, and belonging. And that place, the ranch, the land, the fire, and the bond they shared, was only the beginning of a new life, together. Tomorrow would bring work, challenges, and the chance to continue building, but for tonight, they could rest. The storm had passed, and spring had begun. Life, uncertain but full of promise, stretched out ahead of them, wide and open, waiting to be lived. The frontier was harsh. Life could be cruel. But sometimes when people had the courage to help one another and the wisdom to trust, the most unlikely beginnings became the strongest new starts. And that was exactly what Elias and Lena had found in each other. The wind whispered gently outside, carrying the faint scent of fresh grass and wildflowers. Inside, the cabin glowed with warmth and quiet life. And for the first time in months, Lena felt the certainty of safety, the joy of choice, and the comfort of belonging. Tomorrow, the work would continue, the land would demand their attention, and life would bring its challenges. But tonight, at last, the frontier had given them peace.